Hi, this is Adam Eliel Berkowitz. I feel like I say this every time, and I always mean it. I'm here with a dear friend, a man I respect enormously, a man who's working double overtime to bring the Geula, to bring the final redemption. This is Rabbi
Thank
Harry
you.
Moskoff. He just to show you that I'm not just saying I like him. This is his
Thank
book.
you.
Okay, this is his first book called The Ark Report. Um, Everyone who says I don't want to name names, but there are people out there who lie about their search for the Arona Brit, for the Holy Ark of the Covenant, and they don't know. Rabbi Harry, he knows, and he's done the research, and he knows the sources. He's even gotten his hands dirty, um,
Yeah,
which
for sure.
which makes me triply happy to say that he's just released a new book on Amazon called The Vatican and Me: Unlocking the Divine Treasures Inside Our Divine Heritage. And it just came out. I'm going to run out and get it really soon. And this is about his personal experiences as the director of the Museum Exchange Jewish Heritage Project. He's been directing it over 3 years at the Vatican in Rome. And if we start talking about the Vatican and Geula and the redemption, a lot of people are going to jump to conclusions, and I want to say right here, we are not working on bringing out the holy vessels, but we may be a few steps before that. So Harry, first of all, tell me what your new book is about.
Okay. Hi, everybody. And thank you very much, Eliao. You're very great friends, and you're always the first, thank God, to interview me over the years, many, many years. And there's a lot of great stuff we've gone over together,
Yeah.
really novel things. And it's really a pleasure and an honor. Thanks for having me on your show, on your program. And it's very special. I obviously, highly recommend what you're doing and support it, etc. One thing I have to say, you were saying about the Ark of the Covenant, and I definitely have a theory. I believe 100% in my theory, and I prove it in terms of topography and archaeology and historically, and um, about where the Ark is in the Temple Mount. But it's the only one who really knows is Eliyahu Navi, who you're named after,
Elijah the
Elijah the
prophet who
prophet.
comes before the
Yeah,
Messiah.
that's right. So I mean, I've never seen it. We can't do any archaeological digs over there, unfortunately, on the Temple Mount or anything around it politically. But I do 100% believe in what I wrote. But it is a theory. I just want to say, I'm not a Navi, a
Well,
prophet at the
your
moment,
theories
anyway.
are based in very, very solid Jewish sources.
Oh, definitely, 100%
That's
biblically. That's how I forgot to mention that. You're right. It's mostly biblical sources on the Torah, the Midrashim, the Gemara, everything that all of the obscure sources that people don't come across of what actually happened and when it was hidden precisely 35, 37 years before the destruction of the first temple, Solomon's temple, etc., and why. It's all there. And that's, yeah, absolutely, that's the first thing, of course, and all the rest of it comes to support it, the archaeology, etc. So that's one thing I'm very proud of. And as you said, it's part of a series called Our Divine Heritage. And here's the book right here you
ooh,
mentioning, the
hardcover.
Vatican.
Ooh.
Yeah, there
I'm
it
gonna
is.
get me one of those.
The Vatican and me. You can have a copy. I'll give you a copy.
You're so sweet. You're so
Autographed.
sweet.
Anybody who wants that, by the way, autographed copy, can contact me through my website, which is
I'll be
Harry.
posting the link to your website and to
Thank
the
you.
Amazon page.
Thank you very
I
much.
want people to hear more about this. So, what is it? What is it that the Vatican? I mean, there's been a enormous speculation for 2,000 years about what's in the Vatican. Some of it is like, I mean, you look at the Arch of Titus in Rome, and you see them carrying away the temple menorah,
Right.
temple implements, and you're like, well, that's a pretty good clue, you know. But but so has the Vatican admitted that they've had the temple utensils?
Yeah. Okay. So that's a doozy. It's a big question, and
A
it's a
huge
very
question.
important one. Why? Because for many centuries, many, like thousands of years, okay, the Vatican has just flatly denied the Pope, etc., having anything until proven otherwise. Until very recently, where now the things have changed a little bit, but any little change at the Vatican is significant. And now they neither confirm nor deny having
Wow.
these things. And one of the reasons is due to people like me that actually provide proof in many ways that these things, and it's not just me. I mean, the technology nowadays can, you have a satellite imaging, and you have subsurface mapping, all these things that can tell you right away, go down, into these places at the Vatican or here in Yerushalayim, and look at a field and say, okay, there's something there. You know what I mean? There's not much you can hide nowadays
Right.
technologically, and they know that.
So if they haven't confirmed the temple utensils, what have they confirmed?
Well, the same thing applies. What they confirm is what they show essentially, which is only about 25% of what they actually have. Now, if you've been to the Vatican Museum, have you been there? I don't know if you've.
I've never been there, but I mean, I read about the Vatican archives. People have no idea what the Vatican archives, first of all, are huge.
For
They have
sure.
they have they have in quantity, it's huge, and also the age and the
For
and the
sure.
and if it's coming from the Vatican, you can't say it's fake. It's the real deal.
Right. Right.
And they have things going back more than 2,000 years.
Yeah. Easy. In
So
fact, it's really the history of humanity that they
yeah,
have there, and what they show above is only 20 to 25% of what they actually have in the old storage galleries below, which are literally kilometers of corridors. Some of them I mentioned. I have two chapters about that, chapter 4 and 5, with believe it or not, firsthand stories, accounts of people that have, one person in particular, which I met and I actually interviewed. The story happened about 40, 50 years ago. True story. And now he's no longer with us, unfortunately, but a very reliable source. And what happened to him and his whole incredible experience of what he saw and what he did. And I wanted to include that in my first book, in the Ark Report, but I wasn't sure how, if it was the right time, or
well,
how people would accept it. I didn't want to be in trouble with the Vatican, and not wake up the next morning or
right.
something,
Well, not
you
only
know.
that, the Vatican, the Ark report was published in 2016. Is that correct?
2014,
2014. I
the
guess I got
first
the later
edition, right?
edition. And
So that was about 10 years ago.
2014, the whole relations between Israel and the Vatican were very, very different.
That's right.
So
Excuse me, that's exactly right. Shimon Peres was uh, was leading that. Of course, it makes sense. And he was at the Vatican in 2013 and 14. The Pope came here, and it was very relations were amazing. Right now, by the way, because of the Gaza war, it's really
yeah,
set the relations between the Vatican, the Holy See, as it were, and the state of Israel are very much on the rock because of the Pope's position concerning Israel, etc., which is,
yeah,
definitely
he's
our
come out.
ambassador there is
He,
is trying his hardest. A good guy. I see all the ambassadors when I go there. In fact, I'm going next week for a week to continue this project. They're very much they have a hard job in the sense that the Pope is coming out against Israel
yeah,
and setting back relations quite a bit, unfortunately.
yeah, he met with Mahmoud Abbas once. I think it was
Right,
Abbas, and he called him the angel of peace, an angel of peace. And I was just
angel of
like,
peace.
woo, that's
Yeah, yeah.
and
You should win a
and
Nobel Prize, like Arafat.
right, and ah,
Heaven forbid.
the Nobel Peace Prize. He
Yeah,
shows up wearing an army uniform. Uh,
yeah, exactly,
um,
exactly.
and they also there's a Palestinian embassy, an embassy to Palestine
Right.
in Vatican City. and a Vatican embassy to Palestine, I believe in Jerusalem even. And but their relations with Israel are very different. So
Right.
and at the same
It's a shame.
time, they have a lot of tshuva, a lot of repentance to do. There because now it's coming out more and more about the Vatican's role in the Holocaust.
Yeah,
Their hands are really, they're actually dirtier than we thought before. So Tachlis. Okay,
it's a shame.
they're not gonna polish up the menorah for Hanukkah.
Right.
Okay.
And the other, there's a lot of different, there's a lot of chapter 5 deals with what happened. It's a whole history, really, lesson, a small history lesson of what happened to those vessels after they came to Rome. And, they went to
Yeah, it's not so
Carthage
simple because the
after, and then
Vatican
Italy.
didn't exist when the
And the
vessels
end.
were brought to Rome. So
What
it's
was
not,
that?
the Vatican did not exist when the vessels were brought to Rome.
That's right.
So it's
They
not
were,
clear what happened
it
to them.
was exactly, it was 600 years later. They sort of inherited it. I explained the whole thing of how that happened, and then where they sent them, and the sacking of Rome, and when that happened, and Carthage. Then it went over to Istanbul. It never actually made it back to Rome, but it did make it back to Jerusalem. Those vessels,
Hmm.
and there were a couple menorahs. There were a couple. There was a lot of duplicates in
Right. If I'm
the
not
in the
mistaken, at
Herodian
the time the
temple.
temple was destroyed, there were 10 golden menorahs in the temple. We were commanded to make one, but you know, I guess we got a
Yeah,
discount, you know.
right. It's a machlokes. We know that Shlomo Melech, King Solomon, added 9 more. He kept the one of Moses, of Moshe Rabbeinu, but he made 9 more. But in the second temple, the Herodian temple, um, it's a machlokes whether they kept the 10 in there or they just had one, like the tabernacle, like what was commanded. Most say that there was just one in there. Most of the Chazal, the Jewish sages, but there were definitely. It says, as it says in the Talmud, there were at least 2 or 3 anyway replicas in case
Hmm.
one of them became impure, tamei, and not just the menorah, many other things, except for the ark, of course, which wasn't there in the second temple.
So what are you talking about with the Vatican? Are we talking about, I don't know. What are we talking about?
Okay, so what we're talking about is essentially antiquities, Jewish and Christian antiquities that were in the Byzantine era, which was about 600 years after the destruction of the temple. There were a lot of Jews living in Constantinople. That whole Byzantine was an empire for about 1,000 years, very powerful, half the world they controlled. And the first Latin emperor, Baldwin I, who was a knight before that, he became emperor in the early 13th century, 1204, and he basically was able to, during the Fourth Crusade, he was able to compile a huge amount of Byzantine Jewish artifacts, like antiquities, and same with Christian, of course. He was definitely not religious in any way. He murdered all the religious Christian population in Constantinople, uh, and which the Pope, of course, was very angry about in Rome, etc., in Italy. But he did that because one of the things he wanted to collect a huge amount of and priceless antiquities. In fact, some of this stuff, most of it's Christian, but some of it mixed in there is Jewish, and it's very, very obviously priceless. But one of the things that are in this collection is really the Jewish roots of Christianity. It goes back that far. Things that are very like
Wow.
treasures that go back. So these are really imperial gifts from Baldwin I that were sent over to Pope Innocent III in the year 1204. Now I traced it, and I was approached by people lawyers, etc. This is about 3 years ago, that did a case in the National Library of France, and they came across these original letters from Pope Innocent III and from Baldwin I saying that these priceless treasures are coming over from Constantinople, which is present-day Istanbul, over to Rome, because Baldwin I wanted to appease Pope Innocent III, that was very upset about the all of this, the Fourth Crusade, killing everybody, and he knew that this Pope Innocent III really loved all these old antiquities. And we're talking about like old enamel, beautiful glass enamel, Kiddush cups and jade, and candles for the Sabbath. But more than that, incense, things for the incense, shovels, and what have you, and all
Which are
kinds of
temple artifacts
amazing,
that
yeah,
that
icons. And
probably they were still being used as part of some form of Jewish or maybe even Christian worship.
definitely, we know that after the destruction of the temple, there were synagogues in the north, in Syria, etc. That actually part of the service, the daily worship and service, was bringing incense, just as a member, as like a, not the exact same incense that was in the temple, because that's we're forbidden
Forbidden.
to make that, but something similar, and that extended into from Syria, and also it's basically Sephardic heritage going back, over 1,000 years, 1,200, 1,400 years to the 14th century, and way back even before that, 10th, 9th, 8th century, things that have never been seen before. So the what happened was the Pope ended up getting a lot of this, and over the centuries, the medieval, times, it became, and I traced it exactly through different historians, coming over to the Vatican slowly, even in modern times, in the 50s and the 60s, and even the 1970, that was the last shipment from where it was being kept originally in the Lutheran, St. John the Lutheran Church and Cathedral in Rome, and moving them piece by piece into, like, in small, sort of like quietly, by order of the Pope, and dispersed in the Vatican Museum, including the Jewish stuff. So this book, Unlocking Divine Treasures Inside, is really what I'm doing. I'm tracing it because now we have the proof, and we never did before. And I put it in the book, the actual letters that were written in Latin, medieval Latin, from Baldwin I, the Pope saying, what we have this, and we have the letters of Pope Innocent III, which they themselves, by the way, are hugely valuable and should be in a museum. Actually, some of them are in the Vatican. Anyway, uh,
When the Pope gets
but
bored, when the
actually,
Pope gets bored of watching YouTube, he goes down to the archives to
oh,
check
big time,
out to
big
check
time.
out.
So where did this stuff end up? It ended up, and I spoke to other experts about this, in the papal heritage collection and St. Peter's Treasury heritage collection. Much of it has never been seen before. Most of it has never been seen before. And now because I have this proof, in the last 3 years, I've been going back and forth to Rome and meeting with Vatican officials. And it's a very diplomatic process with the ambassadors, and it's heavy duty.
Yeah, this is what we
Well, I
call
shouldn't
dancing
say.
through the minefield. It
Yeah,
sounds like, if you get the wrong person a little bit like, oh goodness, how dare you say that to me, then huge doors slam shut. You know,
yeah.
and
So far,
that would
so
be
good.
it.
It's
So
been
thank God.
diplomatic. We haven't.
Thank God. It's interesting that it's happening when it's happening.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely. The timing.
definitely, you know, these are unprecedented things that are taking place. For my Jewish viewers, if I'm not mistaken, there's a lot of old Jewish, old Talmuds with different parts that were redacted, a lot of old sources, that the way that there have been scholars who have been given access to that, but it's never really been presented to the public eye. So this could be huge in that level, just for Jewish scholarship.
Well, it'll open doors. If
Yeah.
if things go ahead, and there's a couple phases. Phase two is actually filming, restoring these items and filming them. I can only prove that there's about a dozen items there, the Jewish ones, but there are dozens, hundreds of Christian items there. And the first stage is to film it, and then afterwards to actually bring it out into a museum exchange. That's a program that I'm actually directing, called the Museum Exchange
I mean,
Jewish Heritage Program.
if I was a Christian, I've spoken to a lot of Christians,
Yeah,
and um, the state of Israel has made them reassess or become curious
yeah,
about about the roots of Christianity in Israel, which is where it started. Um,
right,
and they become more curious about their roots and their history. And to be honest, when I speak to Christians, the history of early Christianity,
right.
fascinating.
This is it. This
Yeah,
is
this
it.
is it.
This is the stuff.
Yeah.
It is fascinating, to be honest. It really is.
And
And
it really sheds a light
this
on what Christianity is, even more than the church. The church is like, it really says,
right,
this is Christianity. This is the first Christians. This was what Jesus created. And the church came later and different things happen, you know.
right,
So,
right.
so this is
That's a good
fascinating
point.
level.
A very good point. And I myself am fascinated by that. Um, in fact, my most, I would say, and I didn't realize this. I didn't realize when I started, like for the first couple of years, I didn't realize there was any type of. I thought Christianity as a whole was sort of like united. I mean, I know there's a lot of different sects and stuff, but I had no idea that the Catholics, like the Greek Orthodox and Roman Catholics, and like the real conservative, um, element is completely different than the evangelic
Oh, yeah.
element, like a
Oh, yeah.
different religion almost. And I had no idea about that. And consequently, I found out that my biggest supporters and followers by far are the evangelic crowd, because they come up to me and they say, listen, it's interesting what you're doing. It's great, but we want to see our own heritage.
Hmm.
It's being, the Vatican, we're also Christians, and they're hiding it from us. Forget about the
Right.
Jewish stuff.
Oh
Where's
my
our
gosh.
stuff?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the early Christian stuff that they have that I discovered here, and all of this stuff was tons of it was sent. This is Byzantine. It's very precious, and like I said, it shows the Jewish origins of Christianity, and it hasn't been shown yet. And so a lot of Christian people, I'm talking about pastors and ministers, and people like Mike Huckabee, even you know,
Sure. Yeah.
all the way up, they come and they say, listen, we want you. How can I help you? We want lawyers, all kinds of people out of the blue. They're like, we want to see this. We want to see our own stuff, our own heritage. And that's what it's about. It's getting the heritage and bringing it out to the people. And we have a museum. Unfortunately, because of the war, the way relations are going, the Vatican is not really interested in bringing this stuff, even temporarily on loan to Tel Aviv, to museums here, although we have interest for the Anu Museum in Tel Aviv. But there is another museum, which is very interested, called the Museum of the Bible in Washington.
In Washington, D.C., sure. They have a lot of
Great, beautiful
artifacts, like
new,
real artifacts.
yeah. So they actually have a Vatican room set aside for this type of thing, and they're very interested.
Ooh,
Yeah, and I would love to bring it there eventually. That's phase three, to actually bring the stuff over. And we have private funding. We have, it would be
amazing.
such a huge redemption in a certain sense for these vessels, for these artifacts and antiquities, and, for everybody, for Christians and Jews. And that's why it's such a diplomatic thing.
Yeah, I mean, for a Christian, it's like, okay, Judaism, we go back to the Mount Sinai. And by the time Christianity began, we were already getting ready to leave. And now we're back. But I mean, 2000 years of history, um, if that's your spiritual heritage, I would really want to know a lot about that, as
For
much as I
sure,
can.
to see it.
Yeah.
It's never been shown.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder what what an evangelical Christian, let's say in Texas, would think if he sees a Christian Kiddush cup, for Shabbat, to do Kiddush on Shabbat. That would be like,
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
maybe
But
I'm
that's what
doing
we're
the
talking
Friday
about.
night thing wrong. Maybe, or maybe
That's
I
a
should
very
go
good
back to my
point.
roots.
That's a very, I mean, I've never addressed that before, but now that you said it, That's yeah, we're going back to way back, like to the early, literally, we're talking about fourth century. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Fifth, it's really, really fascinating, and no one's really done research on an academic level, which that's what I'm doing essentially
So
about this stuff because no one's ever seen it.
yeah.
No
So
one knows that much about it.
So I don't want to take up too much of your time because you're getting ready for a big trip. Um,
Yeah,
I mean, and God bless you. I can't
I
imagine
mean, thank
anyone
you.
better to go dancing through the minefield and pluck out some holy objects. You're the
Oh,
man. But the question when I saw your new, but when I read about your first, I think I wrote about this 2 years ago when you first started this project.
right.
I'll put the links to the articles in the
Oh, please,
video for
sure.
people who are interested. It absolutely put the link to the book and your website. Uh,
Thank you.
but the I'm very happy that you'll be getting out Byzantine objects, Jewish and Christian. But
God willing.
the big question, do you think this is do you think this is maybe cracking open the door just a tiny bit to bringing back the utensils for the third temple?
Well, what can I say? Um, it's it's hard to. It's a very tough question to say it publicly,
Yeah. And
just because
I wouldn't want to damage the efforts
it's
because
complicated.
it
It's
is
complicated. You know what
complicated.
I mean? Like politically, and
I
um,
it is
I mean, don't
really
get me wrong. It would be great. It
it
would be
would be
great.
great.
It's not the focus of this project, but it would be very special. It would open not only those doors, it would open doors going forward, going backward, in chronologically, historically, and it would also open. Look, this would one of the objects of the program is to pave the way to open doors between bringing these objects that will help for a peaceful to bring out the different peaceful type of gestures that the Vatican could
Right.
do, which would be great for their image at this point in time, which they could use, in my estimation, and yours, and many others. But like
Sure.
I'll give you an example. Last year in December, the Pope gave a donation, gave those Greek fragments from the Parthenon back to Greece. That was a
And
huge
he
thing.
also there was I'm not sure if it was the Pope that did it, but they gave these relics that I believe were from the cross that Jesus was hung on. They sent them to Bethlehem, I believe, to
Right,
one of the churches. So
right,
the church is the Vatican is opening up, which is great. I
yeah,
also want to emphasize, in order to, I'll tell you a crazy story. Like
please,
6 years ago, um, someone contacted me. There was a family they were French originally. They now live in South Africa, and they had a stone that had been handed down in their family since the Crusades that they say was given to their
right,
ancestor
right. I remember that.
from the Choshen Mishpat, from the breastplate of the high priest.
Right,
I mean, there are a lot of questions about that story, but a
yeah.
lot of experts verified it and said that's what this stone is. Crazy, crazy. Um, and they wanted to sell it for like $30 million or something.
Wow.
And I contacted some rabbis and they said, you know something? We don't need the original temple utensils to, I mean, the Arona Brit, the Ark of the Covenant is different. But we don't need, and even the Ark of the Covenant, we don't need the original utensils to begin the temple, to build the third temple, and
For
certainly
sure.
not to
That's
begin the
right.
temple service. Um,
That's right.
and the temple institute has
Uh,
done an amazing job of making um, kosher utensils, the Kohanic dressings, all of this stuff is being recreated. So we don't have to, you know, make the Vatican angry. I mean, if we have to, we will, but we don't have to. We can
Right.
we can
If it
certainly
could be done without that, it would be
yeah,
preferable.
we could start the temple service tomorrow with what we already have.
All we need is
Literally.
sacrifices.
Literally. Yeah.
We have to be able to set. That's exactly the way Ezra and Nehemiah, Ezra, who was the Kohen Gadol, who was the high priest, when he came back and with the people, after the whole Purim story, and he came back to Israel with Nehemiah. So the very first thing they did was offer. They built a mizbeach, a sacrificial altar. They started that way.
Yeah.
There's nothing to prevent us from doing that.
So if one day the Pope walks up to you and says, "You know, Rabbi Harry, I am thinking," a horrible accent. I apologize. I am thinking of giving back all the temple stuff that we have in our basement to you. And you can turn around to him and say, "It's okay, homie, we got it covered." You know, and it would be
Well, the
true. We
main,
don't need it. People have very strange conceptions about the how to start up the temple.
right. Well, they say to me, a lot of people, I get asked a lot that, do these vessels actually still contain holiness? I mean, they've been there. Let's say we believe that the Vatican has a lot of temple stuff, for sure the Byzantinian stuff. I mean, I haven't seen it, but I prove it. But let's say the temple stuff going back further, does it still retain its holiness? You know, and some of this Byzantinian stuff, they were big holy men using them. Then the definitely big tzaddikim with these Kiddush cups and all these. So do they retain them? And that's a question. It's a huge machloket. It's like there's people say yes, and then there's the whole idea of if these temple items in fact did retain their holiness, there's this idea of me'ilah that where we would be allowed to use it for our own use and etc. And if they didn't, like when the Greeks destroyed the second temple with Antiochus, the whole story there in Hanukkah. So they defiled, they purposely defiled the temple items, the altar and etc. They had to bury it. There's the whole story there. They had to make the temple, all the utensils new. But one thing we for sure would do once we find those, once we get them again, even if the Messiah, there's a midrash that says that if the Vatican doesn't give actually willingly at some point give these things back, the Messiah himself will come and get them from Rome. It actually says that. Really. And
That would
so
make
and that's
I
going
would
to
love to
happen.
see I'd
That's
love to see the live stream on the Facebook Live about
we'll
that.
see it. We'll see it, God willing, or our children, but we'll see it
Here.
hopefully. Yeah, exactly. Listen, by the way, the Messiah is coming to Rome. You may want to just greet him properly, and because he's going to come and he's going to want some items from there, and you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I'm sure they would, but it's not going to be. It's going to be very, very. I guess my point that I'm making is, besides being a very exciting and awesome time that we live in, but it's also one of those things that these items that they do or do not have. One thing we'll learn from them is how to make it. This is how the menorah actually looked, because
Right.
even Moses didn't really know how to make it. He had to throw the coin into the fire and Chatzita Shekel. He was wondering about the menorah, how it would actually look. It was very hard to build, the very first one. So we would learn from it, and yeah, like you said, the Temple Institute has done a good job in general for educating the public about that. And but you were mentioning these gifts, these that the Vatican has done, and others that there's a monastery in Jerusalem, the Monastery of the Cross, in the Valley of the Cross. I'm just telling you, that's a very, very special place. That's all I'm going to say. But it's very, very special. Uh,
I'm going to
and
Jerusalem this week. I'm going to check it out.
oh, it's that whole area, put it that way, that they have there is extremely, unique. And they've got some amazing things there. Just don't go and say, look, Harry Moskoff, I saw him. He said to go there and take your shovel or whatever. Don't quote me on that, but I'm giving you a hint, okay?
Okay. I'm
An
going to check it
educated,
out and
it's
let you
more
know
than an educated
if I find
guess,
anything.
put it that way. And it's coming from a Torah perspective as well.
Right. Right. I mean, in general, I'm finding that we're living in incredibly special times where people are either going one way or the other.
Exactly. I
Um,
mentioned that in the book also.
I'm
Very
not
good, Eliel.
surprised. I'm not surprised. It's like people are
That's it.
either becoming waking up spiritually, and it tends to, even in the Christian world, it tends to be
Yes.
expressed as a love for Jerusalem.
Right.
And then you have people who, for religious reasons or anti-religious reasons, biblical reasons or anti-biblical reasons,
Yeah.
they hate Jerusalem and they hate Israel, and
Right.
they'll make up lies that are blatantly lies and stupid lies.
It's really anti-Semitism
It's yeah, but
inside, just covered,
anti-Semitism. Come on, there's 0.03% of the world is Jews. You know, they could more easily ignore us. It would be easier to ignore us. You know, because
Yeah.
but it's like we're this little blinking light saying, God exists, God exists,
Right.
God exists. And it drives them crazy and they can't stand it. And as the hour of truth comes closer and closer, it drives them crazier and crazier,
That's right.
more extreme. And you're having people who aren't Jewish who are waking up and saying, wow, I want to make sure I'm on the right side. So,
Yes. It's
and
very much, and it even said that in this week's Torah reading. It is a hint to it in I think it's in the Haftorah that the time will come when people are going to have to choose good and bad, and it's going to become, and there's the whole center where a person can sit on the fence and be a bit like one leg on one side and one on the other is totally out the window.
right.
This whole messianic era is choosing Jew or non-Jew, the whole world.
And
What side are you going to be on?
social media is gonna slam that home because people, the Messiah is gonna show up or Mashiach is gonna or whatever, and they're gonna be like, oh, no, 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 I was really on the side of good. Well, but look at all these posts you said about this man being a woman, about killing babies, about all
Right.
this other stuff. What do you were on the good side about how you supported, from the river to the sea, and so you wanted to wipe out Israel, and now Jesus was a Palestinian, and you wrote all that stuff. What are you trying to pass yourself off right
Right.
now as a good person?
And by the way, since you just mentioned that point very astutely, I'll say that that's another thing that we have to deal with, by the way. That's one of the reasons why the Vatican, I spoke with an old ambassador that actually set up the whole, he was architect of the first diplomatic dealings in the 90s between the Vatican and the State of Israel. He really designed the whole thing and opened up diplomatic relations. He told me that one of the reasons why the Vatican is, stalling, it's called diplomatic evasion officially, but one of the reasons is because they have to, they're thinking, what if we bring out the Byzantine stuff? The Christian Arabs are going to say this belongs to us. They will. They'll say the
Sure.
Christian Arabs. What makes you? We're going to have to prove that we were the indigenous people. In Syria at that time, in Israel, and then it's one of those. It's political, and I never even thought of that in a million years. But there's over 1 million Christian Arabs that are Catholic in the Middle East, and I
They
had no
think of
idea.
themselves as the first Christians, as the first
Right.
followers of Jesus.
So they're gonna say, you know what, this stuff, Harry Moskoff's doing a great job, but like hand it over. And you're gonna have evangelicals saying, no way.
I've
And,
also
and
I've also been told, I have a dear friend, Jim Barfield,
oh yeah,
who,
right.
who did
Yeah, I
the
know him.
Copper Scroll Project.
Right,
And the whole thing is, it started out with Vendell Jones, the Copper Scroll. They thought, which was a map to find gold and silver that was hidden from the time
right,
of Jeremiah,
right,
and no one could find it. And then he took down a metal detector and he said, "I think I found a lot of gold, like billions of dollars worth." And the government, since it's a archaeological site, the government won't let anyone near it. And one of the reasons is that if we dig up a bunch of gold and silver in the Dead Sea area, the Palestinians will say it belongs to us, which you think sounds crazy, but the American government actually returned an
right.
archaeological object to the Palestinian Authority, saying, "Oh, well."
It's
It
the
was
West
dug
Bank.
up in the Hebron area, and that's Palestine. And
That's
it's
the
like,
West Bank. Yeah,
you know,
I know. I
so
know.
it's very likely. So Harry, I don't want to take up even more of your.
No problem.
I said we would. You said let's talk for 20 minutes, and I'm like, Harry, if I get you on the
But
phone, it's
I
not gonna
thoroughly,
be 20 minutes.
I thoroughly enjoy this. By the way, I
It's just
really
I'm
have.
so glad.
I
I'm
mean,
so glad. I always love talking to you. Yeah, I mean, buy the book, buy the other book, go to the website. This guy will blow your mind 20 different ways. It's
thank you. God willing.
he's on and searching for the stuff that's gonna change the reality of the world, and you're a lot closer to getting it than most everyone else. So, Harry, I can't thank you enough. Rabbi Harry, I
Thank
can't
you.
thank you enough. You
No
should
problem.
have overwhelming success when you go to the
Amen.
Vatican.
Amen. Thank you.
Okay. Be blessed.
Thank you,
And
Mr. Cook.
everyone, this is the real stuff.